Hi everyone. Tender is one of the most important stages of a construction project for both the contractors and the clients. From the client side, they want to get a qualified contractor with reasonable tender price. From the contractor's point of view, they want to win a construction tender with maximized margin so that they can cover for their general overhead and profit. Therefore, in this video, I will share my experience on how to set profit margin and markup for construction tender. From that, my company is participating a tender for the construction of a commercial project. We are using Kiwi software for tender estimating. Kiwi software, we have finished our estimating with the take-up quantity and estimating unit rates. And here we have construction cost around 500,000 and the model. And so it is the time to add up the markup for this project. There are two ways to include the markup for tender estimating in Kiwi software. The first one is typing directly the markup in the item, for example, 15%. Another way is to use the total markup for the entire project. To do that, we will click to adjustment here, click, and then at the type tab, we change the percent and type what is the percentage we want to apply. For example, 15% here. So the adjustments is for 15%. Markup is around 75,000. I will click OK. And in the data, I will click to trade. And then we can see here the markup and every item. Here I focus on the adjustment for markup is 75,000. And then it seems that we are ready for tender submission. But when we discuss with the management, they said that no, they have to consider the revision of markup because 15% is not enough to cover for the general overhead and profit. There are two types of markups. The first is forward markup and the second is backward markup. Forward markup is the percentage that we apply for the markup, say 20%, 15%, 25%, which we consider is enough for the company's general overhead cost and profit, but we have no information about the actual general overhead cost and profit. And in order to calculate the forward markup, we should be familiar with the profit equation. That's the profit is equal to revenue minus construction cost minus overhead, in which profit is very straightforward and revenue is our tender value and construction cost is our direct and indirect cost for the construction of works like material, equipment, labor, and indirect cost for the construction cost like project manager. And for the overhead is our company's, the main office company general overhead administrative costs like staff salary, office rental, and software and things like that. From the profit equation, alternatively, we have revenues minus construction cost is equal to overhead profit. And in reality, overhead and plus profit is contribution margin, which we often hear from the management. They always ask, what is contribution margin? So keep in mind overhead plus profit is contribution margin. So we also need to know the markup percentage is a percentage added to the construction cost to cover for the tender's overhead and profit. That means contribution margin. So the tender revenue, that means the tender we want to submit for the client is equal to construction cost times 1 plus markup. This is very straightforward. So by using this equation, we will solve the example 1 and example 2 because the markup is related to accounting. So we have to resolve some examples so that we will familiar with the, the terms of the accounting. In example 1, my company is participating a competitive tender for commercial projects, and the estimated construction cost is around 500,000, and my company intends to apply a markup of 15% to cover for their company's overhead profits. So the question is, what is the tender revenue, which means the tender to be submitted to the client? And here the solution, we apply the equation 1 by 2, that the revenue is equal to construction cost, which is 500,000 times 1 plus the markup is 15%, which is equal to 575,000 for our tender revenue. And the following example with the markup 15% above, assuming that the profit and overhead are 5% and 10% respectively. What are the profit amount and overhead budget? And here is very straightforward. The profit is 5% times construction cost is equal to 25%, and overhead budget is 10% times 500,000 is equal to 50,000. And we may ask, what happen if the actual overhead is not 50,000 but is 75,000? So before moving to the calculation of backward markup, it is essential to review the profit equation and some very important terms like break-even. For profit equation, we remember the equation profit is equal to revenue minus construction cost minus overhead, or alternatively, revenue minus construction cost is equal to overhead plus profit. And we remember that overhead and profit is contribution margin. Yeah. So from the equation 1 by 1, we will infer profit is equal to contribution margin minus overhead if you refer to this side of the equation. And let's say the contribution margin ratio, CMR, is equal to the contribution margin divide the revenue. And from this equation 1 by 2, we can infer the contribution margin is equal to contribution margin ratio times revenue. And we will replace equation 1, 3 to equation 1, 2. We will get the very important equation for setting the profit for tender. That the profit is equal to contribution margin ratio times revenue minus overhead. You can forget everything, but you should be focused on this very important equation. So by that, we will resolve the example 3. My company's overhead cost and contribution margin ratio are 70,000 and 15% respectively. That means the overhead cost is 75,000 while the contribution margin ratio is 15%. And my company want to win a project without getting profit. That means profit is equal to zero. That is we call break even. In that case, what is our expected revenue to be submitted to the tender to the client? And B, if we want to set a profit at $10,000, what is our required revenue? So here is solution. We will apply this very important equation 1/4, and in here we get no profit, and we put profit is equal to zero here, and the contribution margin ratio is 15%. We time the revenue times revenue here, and minus overhead is equal to the overhead is equal to 75,000, and then we solve this problem. We can get the revenue in order to have the break even is 500,000. Similarly, for item B, we will set the profit is 10,000 here, and 15% our contribution margin ratio put here times revenue minus the overhead cost is 75,000. So the problem we can get the revenue is 566,000 around in order to cover for the total overhead cost of 75,000 and 10,000 for company's profit. So now we can start calculating for our backward markup. We will calculate the backward markup when we already know the expected revenue of the company, our construction cost, and more importantly, the contribution margin ratio. In this example, the revenue is 1 million and the construction cost is $800,000, and the contribution margin is equal to revenue minus construction cost. As we remember, the contribution margin is equal to the general overhead cost plus profit. In this equation, contribution margin is equal to revenue minus construction cost. That's the 1 million minus 800,000 is equal to 200,000 for the contribution margin, which will cover for the general overhead cost and profit. And another important factor is the contribution margin ratio. As we remember, the formula is equal to contribution margin divide total revenue. In here, the contribution margin is 200,000 divide revenue is 1 million equal to 20%. That means the contribution margin ratio for this project is about 20%. And we have to be aware that the contribution margin ratio is not identical with the markup. Let's say if we use the formula construction cost times 1 plus contribution margin ratio is equal to 800,000. 800,000 times 1 plus 20%. 20% is the contribution margin ratio that we have calculated above, and the revenue will be 960,000. It's not 1 million if we use the contribution margin ratio to apply for the revenue. So we conclude that contribution ratio is not the same as markup. If we apply, we will have a gap between the real revenue and the other revenue. So we have to do the conversion. Markup is equal to contribution margin ratio divide opening bracket 1 minus contribution margin ratio closing bracket, that is equal to 20% divide 1 minus 20% is equal to 25%. That means 20% of contribution margin ratio is equal to 25% of the markup. So in this case, the real revenue will be construction cost times 1 plus markup is equal to 800,000 times 1 plus markup 25% is equal to 1 million. So I repeat that the contribution margin ratio is not the same as markup. We have to do the conversion. Session we have discussed with the finance department, and they provided us a detailed calculation of general overhead or CapEx for 1 year from August 2025 to July 2026. This is our example, is not the real one, so don't be confused about the actual date. So in the general overhead, they give us many items. For example, employee wages and salary is prorated equally for every month, and total is 600,000. Any other item is promotion, contract expenses, computer and office furniture, advertising, marketing, employee benefit, insurance, taxes, office rent, meal allowances, sales cost, software, business trip, bank fees, miscellaneous, and total for this year is 644,000 around. That is general overhead cost for the company. Don't be confused the general overhead cost with the indirect cost of the construction cost. For example, the salary and wages for the project manager and construction manager. For example, we want to allocate these related construction costs to the construction. We don't want to put these costs to the general overhead because it is difficult to control when we want to execute and control the project. So we have the information of general overhead is 644,000 around. We will put here the total overhead 644 around, and every construction company has their own capacity, revenue capacity. For example, they can execute maximum $5 million a year or $6 million a year. For this example, this company has the capable revenue for a month, for a year is around 6 million. So we have revenue here, and this company want to set a profit of 300,000. So in that case, we can use our profit equation to calculate contribution margin ratio is equal to profit plus overhead minus revenue. We may remember to the formula contribution margin ratio is equal to uh, contribution margin divide revenue. So I already made a visual basic formula here. I just put equal CM ratio, and I will click to the function insert function fs here, and I put the profit. Profit is equal to 300,000. Overhead 644, and revenue is 6 million, and click OK. So we have our contribution margin ratio is 15.7%, and we use our conversion formula to calculate the markup based on the contribution margin ratio. Please don't remember, I repeat it many times, that contribution margin ratio is not equal to the markup. So in here, I have already made a formula for markup. We put markup here, and click the ff function, and now this time the CM ratio. You see the formula here. They just add that have one argument is CMR, the mean contribution margin ratio. So I will choose it here and click enter. Okay. So in this case, I have our markup is 18.7%. So come back to the QB software. I will click to adjustment and click percent 17.8%, and you can see the adjustment for overhead profit is 80 around 90,000, and click OK, and see here the trade. Please wait for a moment. So this is our tender revenue. We can use it to submit for the client and to commit with other tenderer. Yeah, I will come back to the Excel file, and we also made a minor table here in which if we put the CMO and overhead profit and profit, if we change this, the markup will be depend on the markup, it will be changed accordingly. Yeah. So we have submitted our tender revenue to the client, and after some time for tender interview and tender negotiation, we will receive a tender notification from the client to inform whether we are successful or not. So irrespective if we are successful or not, we should to record our historical markup, not only for us, but still record the historical markup from the other competitors. How to do that? We still use the same formula to calculate the tender revenue, but this time we changed the tender revenue with tender award. Usually, the client, when notified to us, they might notify who is the successful contractor and uh, the tender, the successful tender price, or otherwise the client will notify on the public social media, or even if the competitors, if they are public companies, they will notify in the public, so that they can increase, they can boost their stock price. So in that case, we will replace the tender revenue with the tender awards and still use the same formula: construction cost times 1 plus markup. Or alternatively, we can refer the historical markup is equal to tender award divide construction cost minus 1. So in the table below, we recorded the project, the type project, commercial, day, tender award, how much, and construction cost, how much. Construction cost is our construction cost because we are unable to know the construction cost of the client or the other competitors. So we will use our construction cost, and we will have the historical markup accordingly. In case we are working for the client, we can also use this formula to make up our historical markup, so that in the future we can analyze whether contractors, tenderers submitted reasonable tender prices or not. Final session, I will discuss on how to use our historical markup to analyze and decide which type of projects and clients we should be focusing on tendering, because when tendering for a project, we have to mobilize many resources, and it's like a dog to the horse if we are unsuccessful. So in this table, we in this column we will have the project from A to C, A to E, and the predicted estimate from clients is from 700,000 to 200 to 2,300,000. We don't know the exact predicted estimate from the client, but usually they will give it a rep tender the rep value, or we can calculate based on the GFAs of that project, and the historical for that kind of project is from it range from 25% to 13.6%, and the contribution margin ratio, we use the conversion markup. It's the same with the how to calculate markup from CMOR. We can infer back from markup to calculate CMOR by using this this calculation formula. So it's equal from range from 20% to 12.0%. And our tender revenue means which tender revenue, what's the amount tender revenue, and what project we should follow. Right? This we put for I mean the estimate only is a variable, or a range of variables we have to calculate through using Excel solver. And the fixed cost we get from the total fixed cost for the company, we get from our accounting department. And as usual, the profit equation is equal to contribution margin ratio times revenue minus fixed cost, we already know. And here I will click here for you, right? CMO times revenue, CMO here times revenue here minus fixed cost here F3. Okay, and fixed cost I'm using here is the equity allocation from our total annual fixed cost of company. In here, if it is equally 1 million, so fixed cost for each project is allocated 128 around. It's the same for the 5 project. And the company's capable revenue is maximum 6 million. So to use these constraints, we will use our solver. We will click to data and click to solver. And what we do here is we want to set G7 profit to maximum by changing our variable cell. We want to change the variable here, and then we have to notify the constraint. We have to report a constraint for Excel. To do that, I will delete this one first. Sorry. So our to add is subject to constraint, we will click add, and Excel will appear as constraint with cell reference. Cell reference is our tender revenue here. This is variable, and our variable less than or equal to pretender estimate. Predicted tender estimate because the clients only awards the contract with maximum amount here. Okay, and we add another constraint is that our sale reference, our total tender revenue equal 6 million, and click OK. And then let's review the solver parameter, the set objective to match by changing variable sale. This is tender revenue and the constraint, and we click solve. It's a very lucky the solver failed solution or constraints and optimality condition are satisfied. We click OK. So we can see here the Excel result tender revenue should be 700,000 for 6 column. That means the yield or the highest historical markup, even though this is a small tender revenue, and they maximize the profit. So we have discussed many essential accounting terms, and we also discussed on how to calculate the contribution margin profit and markup. And more importantly, we have calculated the historical markups in order to analyze, and we can make an informed decision on with the markup we should use for our certain types of projects. I believe my video is maybe useful for those who are interested in tendering, and I thank you for watching and see you on the next video.